Hello everybody, this is David. Welcome back to my channel. This video is a further look at the life and faith of the late Queen Elizabeth II. And I want to read a couple of chapters from this book, A Life of Grace, which is a tribute to Queen Elizabeth II written by Mark Greene. And there's a couple of chapters in here which I found very, very moving and very, very beautiful. And I want to read them to you in this video. So if you're ready, let's continue. So the first chapter that I want to read is titled The Child Who Knew the Way. It was December 1939. Elizabeth was 13. Back in July, she had met and been mesmerized by the man that she would one day marry. The war was 3 months old, and her father, King George VI, was struggling over what he might say in his Christmas message to a nation that had, only 20 years before, fought a war against Germany that had cost millions of lives. No one was under any illusion that this conflict would be less costly in blood or destruction. What do you say to a people who are about to undergo terrible loss and suffering? Elizabeth offered her father a poem by Minnie Louise Haskins to consider. In his broadcast, King George quoted these lines: "And I said to the man who stood at the gate of the year, 'Give me a light, that I may tread safely into the unknown.' And he replied, 'Go out into the darkness and put your hand in the hand of God. That shall be to you better than light and safer than a known way.'" It's not a poem that promises escape or ease or even victory. It is a poem that promises God's companionship, presence, wisdom, guidance. It is a poem about a God who is there and holds out his hand and can be trusted come what may. It is an invitation to walk with him. It would not be the last time Elizabeth would offer that poem to others. It was this poem she quoted in the only foreword she contributed to a book, and that book was The Servant Queen and the King She Serves, a book that focused on the dynamism of her Christian faith, published to celebrate her 90th birthday. And it was this poem too that she offered as her contribution to a collection of reflections published in 2018. On the 9th of April 2021, Philip, the man who captivated Elizabeth some 82 years before, lay in his bed in Windsor Castle, his family around him, and breathed his last. Oh, I'm getting emotional. Describing the moment, Sophie, Countess of Wessex, said, "It was so gentle. It was like someone took him by the hand, and then he went." This is the God Elizabeth gave her hand to, not just at the gate of every year, but at the gate of every day of her long reign. The God who is always ready to receive any hand stretched out to him in trust. And the God who comes to take our hands when we no longer have the strength to offer them. I want to read the next chapter, which is entitled The Woman Who Was Chosen from Above. It was the most watched television event in history up to that time. Some 27 million tuned in and a further 11 million listened on the radio. Elizabeth had at first been reluctant to have any of the Westminster service televised, But Philip, ahead of his time, as he would often be, saw the opportunity to bring the country together, to help her connect to a nation still under rationing, but yearning for a brighter, better future. She agreed, but there was one moment where Elizabeth insisted that the cameras should turn away, the moment of her anointing with oil. Her regalia had just been removed. The crimson velvet robe, the diamond diadem, and the coronation necklace. All that was left was a woman in a simple white dress. She looked like a bride, young, delicate, beautiful, except that the dress was so much simpler than the one she wore at her wedding. The contrast would have been startling to anyone who'd seen the pictures of that wedding dress, and who hadn't, with its 15-foot satin train. And it was in this simple attire, dressed as an ordinary woman, that she readied herself to be anointed. And then she disappeared from public view. A private moment in this most public of occasions, a private moment that set the terms of the public office. God had called her. And so the Archbishop poured anointing oil onto her hands, her chest, and her head to indicate that she had been set apart to love and serve God and her people with all her strength, with all her heart, and with all her mind. That is, as Queen, she was to fulfill what Jesus called the greatest commandment. As we read in Luke's Gospel, chapter 10, verse 27, love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Later, her mother would say that this anointing, not the actual setting of St. Edward's crown on her head, was the most significant moment in Elizabeth's life. It carried for her what biographer William Shawcross called an almost sacrificial quality. Like Christ, whose name means anointed one, she was anointed not to be served by her people, but to give her life in service to her people for her God. That was the commitment she made, and she embraced it wholeheartedly. We shouldn't take that for granted. After all, Elizabeth's uncle, King Edward VIII, had abdicated after less than a year. Furthermore, the life of a minor royal might well have suited Elizabeth admirably. Away from the limelight and the lenses, looking after a country estate, bringing up her children, being heavily involved in the training and racing of horses. But that was not Elizabeth's path, and she saw God's hand in it. It was He who had chosen her for this role, and the anointing was the moment when God confirmed His choice and empowered her for the challenges ahead. She had made promises to Him, and He in turn had promised to help her in what He had called her to do, as He promises us all. He kept His promises to her. As she put it in 1981, Christ not only revealed to us the truth in His teachings, He lived by what He believed and gave us the strength to try to do the same. This, she believed, was how she was able to keep her promises to God and to us. So I want to thank you for joining me in this video. See you next time. Bye-bye.